Stop! The voice cut through the rain like a blade. Deep, calm, absolutely terrifying in its composure. She stopped, not because she wanted to, but because something in that single word made her knees forget how to work. Footsteps approached from behind, measured, unhurried. The confident walk of someone who'd never been told no in his entire life. Turn around. Elena squeezed her eyes shut for just a moment. She'd worked so hard to avoid this. 6 months of keeping her head down, of taking the subway 3 stops past her apartment just to make sure no one followed her home, of becoming invisible in a city that swallowed people whole. And now, here she was, about to face the one man in New York she absolutely could not afford to see. She turned. Dante Moretti stood 15 feet away, and even through the rain and pain and fear, Elena's breath caught. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her car had, before she'd sold it to make rent. His dark hair was slicked back, raindrops sliding down his angular face like they were afraid to linger too long. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. Gray, storm cloud gray, and currently fixed on her with an intensity that made her injured ribs ache worse. Elena. He said her name like he was tasting it, testing it on his tongue after a long absence. Like he'd thought about saying it many times before now. Mr. Moretti. Her voice came out weaker than she wanted. I'm sorry, I was just... You're hurt. It wasn't a question. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, and suddenly he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her think of leather and smoke and things she had no business thinking about. I'm fine, she lied, pulling back. The movement made her gasp, and she hated herself for it. Dante's jaw tightened. Something flickered in those gray eyes, something dangerous and cold and utterly controlled. He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and when she didn't, his fingers gently touched her jaw, tilted her face toward the light. Elena knew what he was seeing. The bruise that spread from her cheekbone down to her jaw. The split lip she'd tried to cover with lipstick. The way she was holding her left side like her whole torso might fall apart if she let go. I asked you a question. His voice had dropped lower, each word carefully enunciated. You have 3 seconds. Who broke your ribs? The rain seemed to pause. The whole world seemed to pause. Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. Her mind raced through the options, through the consequences of each possible answer. If she told him the truth, people would die. If she lied, he'd know. And if she said nothing, 1. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, so gentle it made her chest ache worse than the broken bones. Mr. Moretti? I can't. 2. There was no anger in his voice. That's what terrified her. He sounded calm, patient, like he was asking about the weather, like he wasn't counting down to something that would shake her entire world apart. Please, you don't understand. 3. The word hung in the air between them. Elena watched something shift in his expression, watched the careful control slip just enough to reveal what lay beneath. And what lay beneath made her realize, with crystal clarity, that she'd just made a terrible mistake. He pulled out his phone with his free hand, never breaking eye contact with her. Vincent, I need you at my location. Bring everyone. Wait! Elena grabbed his wrist. The movement sent fresh pain screaming through her chest, but she held on anyway. You can't. They'll kill. They said if I told anyone, they'd... They? Dante pocketed his phone. Both hands came up to cup her face now, forcing her to look at him. Elena, who is they? And there it was. The moment she'd been running from for 6 months. The moment when everything would either fall apart or finally make sense. The men from the warehouse, she whispered. The ones you have a shipment deal with. Russo's crew. She watched the name land, watched Dante's expression go from controlled concern to something else entirely. Something that made the rain seem warm by comparison. Tony Russo. Not a question. A death sentence. Please, you have to understand. My brother Michael, he owed them money. Gambling debts. I've been working it off, but they said I wasn't working fast enough, so they... Her voice cracked. They wanted to send a message. Said I should work harder, clean faster, stop taking breaks. You've been working in their warehouse. Dante's voice had gone very, very quiet. For 6 months. You can't tell anyone. If they find out I told you, they'll kill Michael. They said they have people watching him. Please, Mr. Moretti, I just need more time. How much does your brother owe? The question caught her off guard. What? How much? 50,000, but... And how much have you worked off? Elena swallowed. 17. Something that might have been a laugh escaped him, but there was no humor in it. They have you cleaning their warehouse at minimum wage to work off $50,000. Do you know how long that would take? She did. She'd done the math 100 times, lying awake at night in her tiny apartment, trying to figure out how to speed up the impossible. 4 years, maybe 5, if they keep adding fees. And in the meantime, they own you. They can do whatever they want, and you can't say no, can't quit, can't tell anyone, because they have your brother. Dante's hands were still cradling her face, but his thumbs had stopped their gentle movement. He'd gone very still. Where is Michael now? He's safe. He's been staying with a friend in Connecticut. They don't know where. Elena. He said her name like a prayer and a curse all at once. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do you trust me? I don't know you. Fair. But right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and spending the next 5 years as Russo's slave. So I'm going to ask again. Do you trust me? She thought about the bruises beneath her shirt. About the way Tony Russo had smiled when his men held her down, and one of them had kicked her ribs until something cracked. About how she'd crawled to the bus stop afterward because walking hurt too much. About her brother, oblivious in Connecticut, thinking she was working a regular job to help him get back on his feet. Yes, she whispered. Dante pulled out his phone again. This time, when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Vincent, change of plans. I want 15 men, split into 3 teams. First team picks up Michael Castellano from... He paused, looking at Elena. West Hartford, she said numbly. 316 Maple Street. West Hartford, 316 Maple. I want him in a safe house within the hour. Second team hits Russo's warehouse on the East River. I want security footage from the last 6 months. Every frame. Third team? He paused, and that cold smile returned. Third team stays with me. We're paying Tony Russo a visit. Dante, a male voice said through the phone. That's going to violate the... I don't care what it violates. You have 30 minutes. He ended the call and looked back at Elena. The rain had plastered her hair to her face, and she was shaking. From cold or shock or relief, she couldn't tell anymore. What are you doing? She asked. Fixing this. You can't just... They'll retaliate. The other families won't. Let me worry about the other families. He shrugged out of his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The silk lining was still warm from his body. Right now, you're going to let me take you somewhere safe, and you're going to let a doctor look at those ribs. I can't afford... Elena. He said her name like he was gentling a spooked horse. You're under my protection now. That means you don't worry about money. You don't worry about Russo. You don't worry about anything except healing. Understood? She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she didn't need protection, didn't need saving, didn't need some mafia boss sweeping in like she was a damsel in a Victorian novel. But the truth was, she was so tired. So tired of being scared, of hurting, of calculating every move to make sure she didn't put Michael in danger. Why are you helping me? She asked instead. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You've been working in the building next to mine for 6 months. Every morning at 7, you walk past my office window. You always carry a coffee in a thermos because the cafe prices downtown are too high. You never take the elevator because you say the stairs keep you healthy, but really it's because you're claustrophobic and you think no one notices. On Thursdays, you wear your hair different because that's the day. You visit your grandmother at St. Catherine's before work. Elena's heart had forgotten how to beat properly. You've been watching me. I've been noticing you. There's a difference. His hand came up to tuck a strand of wet hair behind her ear. And 3 weeks ago, you stopped smiling. You started walking with your shoulders hunched, like you were trying to take up less space in the world. I wanted to know why. So, I had someone check into your background, found out about your brother's debt, found out who held it. His jaw clenched. I was going to handle it quietly, pay off the debt, make it look like an accounting error. But I needed time to make sure buying out your brother's markers wouldn't cause problems with the other families. You were going to pay $50,000 for someone you don't even know? I was going to pay $50,000 because watching you disappear a little more every day was driving me insane. He said it matter-of-factly, like this was a completely reasonable thing to admit. Now we're past that. Now they've put their hands on you. So quiet is off the table. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, water spraying from its tires. Dante's hand moved to the small of Elena's back, carefully avoiding her injured side. Come on. Let's get you somewhere warm. She let him guide her to the vehicle because she was out of options and out of strength and maybe, just maybe, out of reasons to keep refusing help from the one man who seemed to actually see her. The interior of the SUV was warm and leather-scented. Dante slid in beside her, immediately reaching for a blanket from the back and wrapping it around her shoulders on top of his jacket. The driver, a mountain of a man with a scar across his temple, didn't ask questions, just pulled smoothly into traffic. Elena's phone buzzed. She pulled it out with shaking hands. The text was from an unknown number. Your shift tomorrow is doubled. 5 a.m. Don't be late. Dante plucked the phone from her hand before she could respond. He read the message, and something in his expression went from controlled anger to something Elena didn't have words for. Vincent, he said to the driver, make that 20 men. And tell Marco I want Russo in front of me within 3 hours. Alive. But he doesn't need to be comfortable. You're going to start a war, Elena whispered. Dante looked at her, and in the passing streetlights, his eyes looked almost silver. No, I'm going to end one. The doctor's office, if it could be called that, was in the basement of what looked like an upscale restaurant in Little Italy. Elena sat on an examination table while an older woman with kind eyes and gentle hands wrapped her ribs, clucking her tongue the whole time. 3 broken ribs, extensive bruising, and... The doctor paused at a mark on Elena's shoulder. This is from a cigarette burn. Dante, who'd been standing by the door, went very still. Show me. The doctor looked at Elena, who nodded weakly. She pulled back the paper gown to reveal the circular burn on her shoulder blade. Tony Russo likes Cuban cigars, Elena said quietly. Said they're expensive, and I should be honored he was willing to waste one on me. The doctor paled. Dante said nothing, but he pulled out his phone and stepped into the hallway. Through the thin walls, Elena heard him say, Vincent, forget what I said about comfortable. I want him to hurt. 20 minutes later, Elena was bandaged, medicated, and sitting in a private room upstairs. The doctor had given her something for the pain. Nothing too strong, she'd insisted, because she needed to keep her wits about her. And now the edges of everything felt soft and slightly unreal. Dante entered carrying a tray. Soup, bread, and tea. You need to eat. I need to know what's happening. But she took the soup anyway, because the smell made her realize she hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Dante sat in the chair across from her, forearms resting on his knees. Your brother is safe. He's in one of my properties in Westchester, and he'll stay there until this is resolved. I have people with him around the clock. Did you tell him what happened? I told him you'd been hurt at work and needed some time to recover, that you'd call him tomorrow. Dante's expression softened slightly. I thought you might want to choose your own words. Elena's throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He leaned back, and the motion made him look every inch the crime boss everyone said he was. Tony Russo is going to be here in about 2 hours. When he arrives, you're going to stay in this room. You're not going to come out, you're not going to look, and you're definitely not going to intervene. Understood? What are you going to do to him? Nothing he hasn't earned. Dante's voice was mild, but his eyes were chips of ice. Elena, I need you to understand something. In my world, there are rules. Lines you don't cross. One of those lines is touching civilians. Another is forced labor, especially of women. Tony Russo crossed both those lines with you, and he did it in my territory, using a business I sanction. You sanction his warehouse? I sanction a lot of businesses in this city. It's how things work. Russo pays me a percentage, and in exchange, I make sure the police don't look too closely at what he's shipping. But that protection comes with expectations. He broke them. Dante stood, and suddenly he was looming over her, all controlled danger. By sunrise, 15 men are going to disappear. Some will run. Some will make the mistake of fighting back. All of them will understand that what happened to you was a mistake that can never happen again. Elena set down her soup with shaking hands. 15 men? What about the other workers? There are women in that warehouse, people who will be paid what they're actually owed and given the choice to work somewhere else or stay under new management. Dante crouched down so he was eye level with her. Elena, I'm not the good guy. Let's be very clear about that. But I'm also not Tony Russo. The people who work in my businesses are paid fairly, treated with respect, and know that if someone hurts them, there are consequences. That's not altruism, it's good business. Happy workers don't talk to the cops. So this is just business to you. Something flickered in his eyes. You really want me to answer that? She did. She desperately did. But before she could say so, there was a knock at the door. Vincent, the mountain of a man who'd driven them, stuck his head in. Boss, we've got him. Dante stood smoothly. He looked down at Elena for a long moment, and she saw him choose his next words carefully. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me or Vincent. There's a bathroom through there if you need it. And Elena? He paused at the door. If you hear anything that scares you, remember that every sound you hear is justice being served. Can you live with that? She thought about the feeling of Russo's men holding her down, about the crack of her ribs breaking, about 6 months of fear and exhaustion, and slowly losing pieces of herself. Yes, she said. He nodded and left. She heard the lock click behind him. For 10 minutes, there was nothing. Elena sat on the bed, sipping her tea, trying not to think about what was happening somewhere else in this building. The painkillers were making her drowsy, but every time she started to drift off, some instinct snapped her back awake. Then she heard the screaming. It was muffled, distant, but unmistakably human. And unmistakably male. Elena's hands clenched around her teacup. She should have been horrified. Should have been disgusted. Should have felt something other than grim satisfaction. She felt nothing but relief. The screaming went on for a long time. When it finally stopped, Elena realized she'd been crying. Not from fear or horror, but from something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously close to gratitude. It was almost dawn when Dante returned. He looked exactly the same. Suit still pristine, hair still perfect, except for his hands. He'd washed them, but Elena could see the red around his cuticles, the proof of what he'd done. He stood in the doorway, watching her, waiting, she realized, for her reaction. Elena set down her teacup and met his eyes. Is it done? It's done. Did you kill him? No. Dante stepped inside and closed the door, but he'll wish I had. By the time I was finished with him, he'd given me the names and locations of everyone involved. 15 men total. My people are picking them up now. By noon, Tony Russo will be on a plane to Sicily, where he'll explain to his family why he lost their lucrative New York operation. I estimate he has about 3 days to live after that conversation. And the other 14? 6 chose to run. We let them. They'll spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, which is its own kind of punishment. 5 are currently being educated on what happens when you break my rules. They'll work for me directly now, where I can keep an eye on them. 3, his jaw tightened. 3 made the mistake of threatening my men. They won't be making any more mistakes. Elena should have felt sick. Should have been horrified that she'd just indirectly caused 3 deaths. Instead, she felt something inside her chest. Something that had been wound tight for 6 months. Finally loosen. "Thank you," she whispered. Dante crossed the room in 2 strides. He dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Say that again." "Thank you." "No." His thumbs brushed away the tears on her cheeks. "Not for that. Never for that. What I did tonight I didn't do for gratitude. I did it because the thought of you hurting, of you scared, of you disappearing a little more every day, it was driving me insane. I did it because I've spent 6 months watching you through my office window and falling in love with the way you tip your face toward the sun when you walk past the park. I did it because somewhere between your terrible thermos coffee and your fear of elevators and your stubborn refusal to ask for help, I stopped being able to imagine my days without you in them." Elena's breath caught. "Dante, I know this is fast. I know you barely know me. I know I'm probably the last thing you need right now." His voice had gone rough. "But I need you to understand something. You're under my protection now, yes. But this isn't just business. This isn't strategy or territory or any of the usual calculations. This is me telling you that I will burn down every warehouse in New York if that's what it takes to make you feel safe again. This is me saying that I want you in my life, and I'm willing to wait as long as it takes for you to want the same thing. Weeks, months, years, however long you need." The sun was starting to rise outside the window, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. In that light, Dante Moretti looked less like a crime boss, and more like a man who'd just laid his entire heart at her feet and was waiting to see if she'd crush it. Elena reached out slowly, her fingers tangling in his dark hair. "I should be scared of you." "You probably should. I should run as far from this life as I can get. That would be smart. I should tell you that this is crazy, that we don't know each other, that I need time and space and... Elena." He said her name like a plea. "What are you actually going to do?" She leaned forward, ignoring the protest from her ribs, and pressed her forehead to his. "I'm going to say yes." "Yes to what?" "To you. To this. To whatever insane thing this is that we're doing." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "6 months ago, I watched you through the window of that warehouse while I was scrubbing floors. You were in your office, talking on the phone, and you laughed at something. I'd been crying because my ribs hurt, and I didn't know how I was going to survive another day. But then you laughed, and for just a second, I remembered what it felt like to be happy. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was building fantasies about a man I'd never meet. And now you're here, on your knees, telling me you noticed me too." "I did more than notice you," Dante said roughly. "I memorized you." "Then memorize this too. I'm saying yes to you, Dante Moretti. But I'm not going to be kept. I'm not going to be a pretty thing you hide away and protect. If I'm going to be part of your life, I'm going to actually be part of it. Partners. Equals. I'll learn your world, and you'll learn what it's like to have someone who sees you as more than the boss." Something that might have been awe crossed his face. "You're negotiating with me right now, with broken ribs, after the night you've had. Is that a problem?" "No." He stood, pulling her gently to her feet with him. His hands settled on her waist, careful of her injuries. "It's perfect. You're perfect. And if you're serious about this, about us, then I'm going to need you to do something for me." "What?" "Marry me." Elena laughed, then winced because laughing hurt. You're insane. Probably, but I'm also serious. Dante's expression was completely earnest. Elena, in my world, the only way to truly protect you is to make you mine in every way that matters. My wife is untouchable. No one would dare hurt her. And beyond that, beyond strategy and protection, I want it. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're mine. I want to watch you drink your terrible thermos coffee for the rest of my life. I want to give you everything you've been missing. We've known each other for 12 hours. I've known you for 6 months. You just didn't know I was paying attention. Elena stared at him. This beautiful, dangerous, impossibly intense man who'd just turned her entire world upside down. The smart thing would be to say no. To take the protection he was offering, heal, and then disappear before she got in any deeper. But Elena had spent 6 months doing the smart thing, and all it had gotten her was broken ribs and nightmares. Ask me again in 6 months, she said finally. If we still feel this way in 6 months, ask me again. Dante smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. Deal. But I'm warning you now, I'm going to spend every one of those days making sure that when I ask again, the answer is yes. Confident, determined. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his lips brushed hers so gently it made her ache. I'm going to take care of you, Elena. I'm going to give you time to heal, time to trust me, time to see that this is real. And then I'm going to marry you in a ceremony so extravagant that everyone in New York knows. You're mine. Possessive much? You have no idea. He kissed her again, still gentle, still careful of her injuries. Come on, let's get you home. Your real home, not that apartment you've been barely surviving in. I have a guest room prepared. Your brother will be there tomorrow, once the doctor clears you to have visitors, and then we'll figure out the rest together. Elena let him guide her toward the door, his arm solid and warm around her waist, as they walked through the restaurant, now empty except for a few of Dante's men cleaning up. She saw Vincent standing by the door. He nodded at her, respect clear in his eyes. Boss, Vincent said as they approached. Everything's handled. The warehouse has new management as of an hour ago. The workers have been notified. And Michael Castellano sends his regards. He wanted me to tell Elena he's sorry for everything. He doesn't need to be sorry, Elena said quietly. He didn't know. He knows now, and he knows his sister has the best protection in New York. Vincent's scarred face almost smiled. Boss here hasn't stopped talking about you since the day he saw you carry a stray cat 5 blocks to the shelter because you were worried it was cold. Elena turned to Dante, who was suddenly very interested in his phone. You saw that? It was raining, he said defensively. The cat was soaked. You were already late for work, but you carried it anyway. And you've been watching me ever since. Noticing there's a difference. Vincent definitely smiled this time. If you say so, boss. Car's ready when you are. The drive to Dante's home took them out of the city and into Westchester, to an estate that made Elena's breath catch. Stone walls, iron gates, gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. This is too much, she said as they pulled up the circular driveway. This is safe, Dante corrected, and it has 17 bedrooms, so you'll have plenty of space to avoid me when you decide I'm being overbearing. When, not if. I'm very self-aware. He helped her out of the car, and Elena realized how exhausted she was. The adrenaline was wearing off, the painkillers were making her fuzzy, and her body was finally admitting just how much it had been through. Dante must have seen it because he suddenly scooped her up, cradling her against his chest. I can walk, she protested weakly. I know, but you don't have to. He carried her through the massive front doors, past a chandelier that probably cost more than her childhood home, and up a sweeping staircase. This is your room. It's connected to mine through that door there, but it stays locked unless you unlock it. You have complete privacy, complete safety, and complete control. He set her down gently on a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. The room was decorated in soft blues and creams, with windows that overlooked the gardens and the sunrise painting. Everything gold. "Dante," Elena said as he started to leave, "thank you. For everything. For believing me. For acting so fast. For... Elena." He turned back and the expression on his face made her chest tight. "You don't need to thank me. Not for this. Not ever. This is what it means to be mine. This is what I do for the people I..." He paused, then said carefully, "For the people I care about." He'd been about to say love. Elena heard it in the words he didn't say. "Get some rest," he said instead. "I'll be right next door if you need anything. And Elena? Welcome home." He left, the door clicking softly shut behind him. Elena lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. She'd gone from beaten and terrified to protected and cherished, from completely alone to the center of someone's world, from surviving to actually living. It was insane. It was too fast. It was probably dangerous and definitely complicated, and she should absolutely be more cautious. But as Elena finally let herself relax into the soft bed, in the safe room, in the home of the man who'd looked at her broken ribs and declared war, she realized she didn't want to be cautious anymore. She wanted to be brave. And being brave, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, looked a lot like saying yes to Dante Moretti. 6 months later, Elena stood in front of a floor-length mirror, adjusting the simple gold necklace at her throat. The necklace had been Dante's grandmother's, and he'd given it to her last week with shaking hands, and the kind of vulnerability that still surprised her every time she saw it. "You look beautiful." She turned to find Dante in the doorway, devastating in a black tuxedo. 6 months had changed him in subtle ways. He smiled more, laughed easier, and the hard edges that had seemed so sharp when they met had softened into something warmer. "You're supposed to be downstairs," she said. "Isn't it bad luck to see me before?" "That's for weddings. This is just a party." He crossed the room and pulled her gently against him, careful as always of her left side, even though the ribs had healed months ago. "Although, about that... Dante Moretti, if you're about to propose to me at your charity gala..." "Our charity gala," he corrected. "The Elena Castellano Foundation for Exploited Workers is as much yours as mine. More, actually, since you're the one who runs it." It was true. In the months since that terrible night, Elena had thrown herself into creating something good from something awful. The foundation helped people trapped in situations like hers, debt bondage, forced labor, impossible contracts. They'd already helped 43 people escape, find real jobs, and rebuild their lives. Dante had funded it all without blinking. "You were saying?" Elena prompted. "I was saying that it's been 6 months. You told me to ask again in 6 months. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Elena Castellano, I have loved you since the day I saw you carry a wet cat 5 blocks in the rain. I have loved you through every terrible thermos coffee, every stubborn argument, every moment you've challenged me to be better. I've loved watching you build something beautiful from your pain. I've loved learning what it means to be part of a partnership instead of just giving orders. I love you, completely, permanently, inconveniently." "Inconveniently? You have terrible taste in movies and you steal all the blankets." But he was smiling as he opened the box, revealing a ring that made her breath catch. Simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the light like a star. "Marry me, Elena. Let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt how cherished you are." Elena looked at the ring, then at the man holding it, then at the life they'd built together over the past 6 months. It had been messy and complicated and sometimes scary. But it had also been real. "Yes," she said simply. Dante's hands shook slightly as he slid the ring onto her finger. Then he pulled her close and kissed her like a man who'd just been given everything he'd ever wanted. "We're going to be late to our own gala," Elena murmured against his lips. Let them wait. He kissed her again, deeper this time. I'm not done memorizing this moment. 20 minutes later, they finally made it downstairs, where 300 of New York's most powerful people were waiting. Elena felt the eyes on her as they entered, some curious, some respectful, and some still skeptical of the former warehouse worker who'd somehow captured Dante Moretti's heart. But then Dante took her hand, raised it to his lips, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to my fiancée, Elena Castellano, the strongest person I know, and the woman who saved my life by letting me save hers. The room erupted in applause. Michael, healthy now, employed at one of Dante's legitimate businesses, and free of his gambling addiction thanks to months of therapy, caught Elena's eye from across the room and mouthed, I'm proud of you. Elena smiled, squeezed Dante's hand, and stepped forward into her new life. The one where she was safe, cherished, and powerful in her own right. The one where saying yes to a dangerous man had turned out to be the smartest decision she'd ever made. Because sometimes, she thought as Dante pulled her onto the dance floor and the orchestra began to play, sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is trust. And sometimes that trust is rewarded with everything you never knew you needed. I love you, she whispered as they swayed together. Dante's arms tightened around her. I love you more. Impossible. Want to bet? Elena laughed, free and joyful and completely unafraid. You're going to be the most obnoxious husband, aren't you? Absolutely. He spun her gently, mindful even now of injuries long healed. But I'll also be the most devoted, the most loyal, the most helplessly in love. Deal, Elena said, and kissed him in front of 300 witnesses, sealing a promise that had started with 3 broken ribs and 3 seconds to answer a question. She'd given him the truth, and he'd given her the world. It was, she thought, a fair trade. The champagne had barely been poured when Elena felt it, that old, familiar prickle at the back of her neck that said something was wrong. She was laughing at something Michael had said, her hands still intertwined with Dante's, when she saw Vincent push through the crowd with an expression that made her blood run cold. He moved like a man trying not to cause panic, but his eyes were scanning the room with the kind of intensity that meant trouble. Dante saw it too. His grip on Elena's hand tightened imperceptibly, and that easy smile he'd been wearing all night flickered for just a second. Stay here, he murmured, already moving toward Vincent. Not a chance. Elena followed, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She'd learned in the last 6 months that Dante's version of protection sometimes meant leaving her in the dark, and she'd made it very clear that wasn't how their partnership worked. They met Vincent at the edge of the ballroom, near the hallway that led to Dante's private office. The big man was sweating despite the air conditioning, and his hand rested on something under his jacket. Boss, we have a situation. Carlo Vitelli is here. Elena felt Dante go completely still beside her. In 6 months, she'd learned to read his silences. This one was dangerous. Vitelli's in Chicago, Dante said quietly. He doesn't come to New York without clearing it with me first. He's here anyway. Showed up at the east entrance with 8 men. Says he needs to speak with you immediately. Says it's about the Russo situation. Elena's stomach dropped. Tony Russo, the man who'd broken her ribs, burned her with cigars, enslaved her for 6 months. Dante had sent him back to Sicily in disgrace, where his own family had supposedly dealt with him. That was supposed to be the end of it. Tony's dead, Dante said, voicing what Elena was thinking. His family confirmed it 3 months ago. Yeah, well, Vitelli says otherwise. Says Tony's alive, and he's been talking. Says some very interesting things about what happened that night. Vincent's jaw tightened. Boss, he's got photos, security footage. I don't know how, but show me. Vincent pulled out his phone, and Elena leaned in to see, despite the sick feeling in her stomach. The photo was grainy, but unmistakable. Dante's face, covered in blood that wasn't his, standing over a man who was very clearly Tony Russo. The timestamp showed the night Elena had been beaten. The night Dante had made 15 men disappear. This was supposed to be destroyed, Dante said, his voice deadly calm. Someone kept a copy. Vitelli's saying that what you did to Russo violated the Accords, that you tortured a made man without approval from the Commission, that you started executing people without consulting the other families. Vincent glanced at Elena, sympathy in his scarred face. He's saying you did it all for a woman, that you let personal feelings override business. He's not wrong, Dante said flatly. Boss, he's calling for a vote. Right now, tonight, with everyone here. He wants the Commission to strip your territory. Maybe worse. And he's got 5 families already agreeing to hear him out. Elena's mind was racing. A Commission vote. She'd learned enough about Dante's world to know what that meant. If the other crime families decided he'd overstepped, they could take everything. His businesses, his territory, his life. They could decide he was too volatile, too emotional, too dangerous to have power. All because he'd protected her. How long do I have? Dante asked. He's in your office now, waiting. Vincent hesitated. He asked for Elena to be present. Says she's at the center of this, so she should hear what he has to say. Absolutely not. Dante's voice could have cut glass. She's not part of this. She doesn't. Yes, I am. Elena stepped forward, ignoring the way her heart was trying to hammer out of her chest. If this is about me, if you're in trouble because of what you did to protect me, then I need to be there. Partners, remember? Equals? Dante looked at her with something that might have been fear. She'd seen him angry, protective, possessive, and gentle, but never afraid. Elena, you don't understand what you're asking. Carlo Vitelli is not Tony Russo. He's smart, connected, and completely without mercy. If he decides you're a weakness, he can exploit. Then he'll find out he's wrong. Elena squeezed his hand. I'm not the same woman you found bleeding in the rain 6 months ago, Dante. You made sure of that. So let me stand beside you. Let me help. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he turned to Vincent. Tell Vitelli we'll meet him in 5 minutes. And Vincent, I want everyone we trust in that hallway. If this goes bad, I want Elena out of the building in under 30 seconds. Already done, boss. As Vincent walked away, Dante pulled Elena close. His forehead pressed against hers, and she could feel the tension radiating through him. If anything happens to you because of this, nothing's going to happen to me. You won't let it. She cupped his face in her hands. And I won't let anything happen to you either. So let's go deal with this together. The walk to Dante's office felt like miles instead of feet. Elena could feel eyes on them. The party guests were starting to notice something was wrong. Whispers spreading like wildfire through the ballroom. Michael caught her eye and started to move toward them, but she shook her head. Whatever was about to happen, she didn't want her brother anywhere near it. Dante's office was massive, all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the estate grounds. But right now, it was occupied by 8 men in expensive suits, all standing with the kind of stillness that suggested they were armed and ready to use those weapons. And in Dante's chair, behind Dante's desk, sat Carlo Vitelli. He was older than Elena expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face that might have been handsome before it had been carved into something harder. He smiled when they entered, but it was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood. Dante Moretti. And this must be the famous Elena Castellano. Vitelli gestured to the chairs in front of the desk like he owned the place. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. You're in my chair, Carlo. Dante's voice was conversational, but Elena heard the steel underneath. Am I? Funny, I was under the impression that after tonight, it might not be your chair anymore. Vitelli leaned back, completely at ease. But we can discuss the details. Sit. Both of you. Elena felt Dante's hand at the small of her back, guiding her forward. They sat, and she forced herself to meet Vitelli's gaze without flinching. She'd been afraid before. She'd survived worse than this. "I'll make this simple," Vitelli said. 6 months ago, you tortured and exiled Tony Russo without commission approval. You executed 3 of his men. You stole his business operations and redistributed them without consulting anyone. All of this because he gestured at Elena. Because this woman got herself into trouble with a debt her brother owed. Careful how you speak about her." Dante's voice had dropped to that dangerous quiet that Elena knew meant someone was about to get hurt. "Or what? You'll do to me what you did to Russo?" Vitelli laughed. "That's exactly the problem, Dante. You've always been emotional. Always let personal feelings cloud your judgment. Your father would be ashamed." Elena felt Dante tense beside her, but before he could respond, she leaned forward. "Mr. Vitelli, I have a question. Is Tony Russo alive or dead?" Vitelli's eyes shifted to her, surprised. "What?" "You said he's been talking, that he told you things. But Dante was informed 3 months ago that the Russo family dealt with him in Sicily. So which is it? Is he alive and talking, or is he dead and this is all speculation?" For the first time, Vitelli's smile faltered. "That's not... The point is that you don't know," Elena continued. She had no idea where this confidence was coming from, but she wrote it anyway. "You have security footage from that night, yes. But you don't actually have Tony Russo, which means you're here on a fishing expedition, hoping to destabilize Dante's position by making the other families question his judgment." "Elena," Dante said quietly. A warning and a question all at once. But she ignored him, keeping her eyes on Vitelli. "Let me tell you what actually happened that night. Tony Russo and his men held me down and broke 3 of my ribs because I wasn't working fast enough to pay off my brother's gambling debt. A debt that, by the way, should have been cleared 2 months before that, but Russo kept adding fees to keep me trapped. He burned me with cigars. He threatened to kill my brother. And he did all of this while paying Dante for protection, which means he broke the very rules you're pretending to uphold." "That's not how this works," Vitelli said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "You don't get to..." "What's the punishment for forcing civilians into debt bondage?" Elena asked. "What's the penalty for beating women who can't fight back? What happens to made men who abuse the protection they're paying for?" Vitelli's face had gone red. "You don't ask questions here, girl. You don't have standing in this room. No, but I have a voice. And I'm using it to tell you that Dante Moretti did exactly what any of you would have done if someone had hurt the woman you love. The only difference is that he was honest about it, instead of hiding behind bureaucracy and votes." The room had gone very quiet. Even Vitelli's men looked uncomfortable. "More than that," Elena continued, and now her voice was steel. "I'm telling you that if you try to strip Dante's territory, or hurt him because he protected me, you're going to have a problem. The Elena Castellano Foundation has helped 43 people in the last 6 months. People trapped in situations just like mine. People who are now very loyal to me and very willing to talk about where they came from and who was responsible for their situations. I have documentation on 17 families operating in New York. 17 operations that violate your precious rules. And if anything happens to Dante, all of that documentation goes to the FBI within the hour." Dante's hand found hers under the desk, squeezing so hard it almost hurt. She squeezed back. Vitelli stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You're threatening the commission." "I'm stating facts. Dante broke your rules to protect me, yes. But he did it in a way that cleaned up an operation that was making you all look bad. He did it quickly, efficiently, and without involving law enforcement. And now you want to punish him for being effective?" Elena stood slowly, pulling Dante up with her. "Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Vitelli. You're going to take your security footage and your accusations and you're going to leave. You're going to tell the other families that this was a misunderstanding. And in exchange, I'm going to keep my documentation exactly where it is, locked away and forgotten. And if I refuse, Vitelli was standing now too, his face purple with rage. Then I go public. Not to the FBI, to the media. I tell my story. I show my scars. I name names, and I let the court of public opinion decide what should happen to the men who torture women for profit. She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. Your business empire can survive a lot of things, Mr. Vitelli, but it can't survive that kind of attention. Not in today's climate. Not with social media and hashtags and movements. You'll be radioactive within a week. The silence stretched so long, Elena thought her heart might actually stop. Then Vitelli laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound that held no humor. You've got nerve, girl. I'll give you that. He looked at Dante. She always like this? Only when someone threatens her family, Dante said softly. You should leave now, Carlo, while she's still in a generous mood. Vitelli studied them both for a long moment. Then he shook his head. Your father would have handled this differently. My father would have killed you for sitting in his chair, Dante replied. I'm letting you walk out. Take the win. Slowly, deliberately, Vitelli stood and walked around the desk. He paused in front of Elena, and for a second she thought he might actually try something. But then he just smiled. A real smile this time, with something that might have been respect in it. You're either very brave or very stupid. I haven't decided which yet. He turned to Dante. Consider this settled. But Moretti? Next time you want to start a war over a woman, maybe give the rest of us a heads up first. There won't be a next time, Dante said, because no one is ever going to hurt her again. Vitelli nodded once and left, his men filing out behind him. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the office felt twice as large and half as oppressive. Elena's knees went weak. Dante caught her immediately, pulling her against his chest. What the hell was that? He asked, but he was laughing, shaky, relieved laughter. Elena, do you have any idea what you just did? Probably something incredibly stupid, she admitted, her face pressed against his shirt. Please tell me he's actually leaving. Vincent's watching him to the car right now. Dante pulled back just enough to look at her. But seriously, documentation on 17 families, FBI, social media campaigns, do you actually have any of that? Some of it. The foundation really does have records, and I really would go to the media if I had to. She looked up at him. But mostly I was bluffing. Badly. You were magnificent. He kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promises. You were terrifying and brilliant, and I have never been more in love with you than I am right now. Even though I probably just made you enemies, you just saved my life, our life, everything we've built. He cupped her face in his hands. Carlo Vitelli respects power. You showed him you had it, that you were willing to use it. That's the only language men like him understand. Elena let out a shaky breath. I was so scared I was going to throw up on his shoes. But you didn't. You stood there and faced him down like you were born to this. Dante's eyes were bright with something that looked like pride and wonder and love all mixed together. My father used to say that the most dangerous person in any room isn't the one with the most guns. It's the one with the most to lose and the courage to risk it anyway. Your father sounds like he was very wise. He was a paranoid bastard who died of a heart attack because he trusted the wrong doctor, but sometimes he got things right. Dante kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Marry me tomorrow. Tomorrow? Elena laughed. Dante, we just announced our engagement tonight. I don't care. I want you to be my wife. I want everyone to know that you're not just under my protection. You're my equal, my partner, my everything. I want Carlo Vitelli, and every other man who might think about threatening you, to know that hurting you means going to war with the most powerful family in New York. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. He pulled the ring on her finger, making it catch the light. Tomorrow, Elena. Say yes. She thought about the life they'd built in 6 months, about how she'd gone from scrubbing warehouse floors to running a foundation. About how this dangerous, powerful man had looked at her broken ribs and declared war. About how she'd just bluffed her way through a confrontation with the Mafia and lived to tell the tale. About how being with Dante Moretti meant never being afraid again. "Yes," she said. "Tomorrow, but I'm picking the dress." His smile could have lit up the whole estate. "Deal. Now let's go back to our party. We have 300 people waiting to celebrate, and I want to dance with my fiancée before she becomes my wife, and I have to share her with the world." They walked back to the ballroom hand in hand, and if anyone noticed that they looked slightly shaken, no one said anything. The orchestra was still playing, the champagne was still flowing, and the night was still young. But everything had changed. Elena had faced down the darkness, and won. She'd proven that she wasn't just Dante's weakness, she was his strength. And as they stepped onto the dance floor and he pulled her close, she realized that this was what power really felt like. Not control, not domination, but the absolute certainty that someone would burn the world down before they let anything hurt you, and the knowledge that you'd do the same for them. "I love you," Dante whispered against her ear as they swayed together. "I love you more," Elena replied, using his own words from earlier. "Impossible. Watch me." And as the music played and the night wore on, Elena Castellano smiled, free and fierce and completely unafraid of whatever came next. Because tomorrow she'd marry a Mafia boss, and heaven help anyone who tried to stop her.